I'm just getting things kicked off. I was debating whether or not I would make an appearance tonight, to be honest, but I had one of the children contact me offline and ask if I was going to show up, so I guess that's a good sign. So here I am, and hello, children. Tamber says hello, and we're just going to get things started, right? So I know that we just might have one or two people actually show up today. So uh, if you show up and are here to chat, what have you, um, welcome. This is Ask Mama Lynn Anything, and today is the Friday Night Loser edition because even though it's COVID, we could potentially have, something to do on a Friday night, but I do not. I spent a good chunk of my day today actually doing grocery delivery, and that's about it. So anyway, for those of you who are new to AMLA or the Ask Mama Lynn Anything channel, I am a fairly newly launched channel, and basically the premise of it is based in this idea that evolved from um, some stuff that was going on when I was in college. I used to um, spend significant amounts of time in the dorm lobby doing a jigsaw puzzle. And I started out being the puzzle lady, and then I evolved into Mama Lynn. I became Mama Lynn because people came to know that they could come and talk to the puzzle lady about anything and everything in their life. And so that is why I am here. I got it in my head that maybe one of the things I could actually do was try to make things a little bit easier, better, at least a little less lonely for people, including myself, by simply embracing one of the few things in my life that I'm sure that I did an okay job at. So that's why we're here. If what was that? Anyway, so we're kind of random, not a whole lot of like pre-programmed material yet on this channel, though if you look kind of historically speaking, there are hours and hours and hours of time that I have spent on here already, because basically the premise is anybody and everybody is welcome to come hang out. You are welcome to ask any question. There is an email address that is supplied in the description for anyone who wants to ask questions or pose stories, questions, comments, concerns, looking for advice in your life, whatever it is. You can submit those things to the email in the description if you prefer to be anonymous. Otherwise, drop it in the chat, and that's what we're here for. Um, so one of the things that does happen is if there's not a lot of engagement going on, what ends up happening is you get free association from me. That essentially means that, I'll be talking about anything, everything, whatever that I have been thinking about watching, um, all of that in the last couple of days or since the last stream, or, just whatever comes to my brain. Um, I do have a tendency of tangential storytelling. So I can start on one topic and kind of skip around. Um, Kind of in that realm, the other kind of reason why I thought this was a good idea is because on a different platform I used to go on as Lynn the storyteller, and there was this whole thing where people could come into the stream and give me a subject, and like the whole idea was you give me the subject, I'll give you a story from my life or just kind of my understanding of the world or things that I've been exposed to, so that you can explore with me or laugh with me or whatever. So, yeah, um, I think a lot of people who know me know that I have been through a plethora of life experiences. Um, so, I think part of the whole grand scheme of this is also to bring a little bit of levity and, I don't know, value to those experiences, because clearly I've learned from them, but I think that other people could certainly learn from them as well. So I have done vlogging about weight loss, I've done vlogging about um, the experience of being, going through certain types of surgeries and dealing with certain types of conditions. So, yeah. Anyway, when I was thinking about doing this earlier today, even before the chillin that contacted me to see if I was going to be live today, I actually had thought about a topic that I would free associate on, um, and just kind of talk about it, because it's been weighing on my brain since it uh, came into my consciousness in the last couple of days. And by the way, any of you who do not know or missed it, this fur baby right here is my grandma cat. Her name is Timber. She is extremely, extremely prone to asking for the attention. The minute I start talking, she will jump up on the chair and start pawing, clawing, meowing. Don't you? She just sits there and stares at me, nose bunks. Today, she seems to be particularly curious or interested in my lipstick, which I put on just for you. Because when I was doing, I don't know, setting up lighting and stuff like that, I just kind of looked really washed out and gross. So hopefully, hopefully I look a little bit better. So let's see. I'm like, YouTube reports to me that there are a couple of people who might be watching right now. So if you are here and you are watching, feel free to drop a hello or whatever into the chat just so that I can see you, because I'm still learning a lot about this platform. And since I am also a really new to it, I don't have access to a lot of features. So I haven't figured out if there's any way for me to see people who are watching in the same way that you can with like Twitch. But so far I haven't figured it out. So I have absolutely no idea if somebody's watching me right now until like the tick of the viewers continues going, and it tells me how many people were still watching at that time. Um, so yeah, please just let me know. But anyway, are you gonna sit there? You gonna go to sleep? You gonna pin down my arm? She seems pretty worried about me. For those of you who were around last weekend, or kind of may have peeked at one or two streams since then, um, yes, my shoulder is still bruised and sore and broken up or whatever. It's still swollen. We still do ice. I have a couple of really cute pictures of me with my nursemaid here, including a video of her making biscuits on my stomach while I was trying to do ice. It's very cute. It's going to be a really enduring memory for me. She's the very first, like, furry baby that I have had in my whole life. And it makes me simultaneously very happy and very nervous at the same time. So, and she stares at me in this way that I'm like, do you need something other than my attention? Or do you just want my attention? Huh? So, uh, like getting back to like what I said, where I actually was thinking about something that I could talk about today. Hi, Chris. How are you? I don't know if you just missed my entire intro, but so be it. Um, I'm here to answer to any of life's questions, give any advice, or just kind of expound from my, I don't know, my Mama Lynn perspective. See how it goes. Yeah, so usually like in the beginning, like I repeat myself a fair amount. So hopefully as things kind of go in, like we get a little bit um, more, I don't know, smooth. I'm exceptionally awkward about it. So you'll have to forgive me and don't have like a whole spiel. I don't have like a commercial that I do for myself every time. I don't do the whole, um, oh yeah, do this. Please follow me on all of my social medias and stuff. Like I have a Facebook page for this. I have the email address for this. I do have a Twitter that I'll eventually use for this, but everything else just kind of lumps under the same umbrella that I've been using for everything else. So to kind of recap, the idea behind Mama Lynn is that uh, back when I was in college, which, reveal my age by saying that was over 15 years ago, I was dubbed Mama Lynn after building a reputation as being the puzzle lady that you could go talk to within the dorms. So ultimately, what would happen is I would set up a jigsaw puzzle in the lobby of the dorm, and then I would spend exceptional amounts of time there. And everybody could come sit down with me, work on the puzzle, but really it was just a tool to facilitate conversation. So we are here to kind of help people experience a little bit of community, a bit of connection and exchange, conversation. Um, I'm certainly here and ready to divulge a bunch of information or no information or reveal how stupid I am. Um, and in the meantime, you'll watch me dork around with stupid games at the same time. If my cat will let me. So, yeah. So, usually we kind of start out by having the cat make her decision that she needs the attention. I will check in on the peer counseling page that I do peer counseling through. I look at the emails and then I free associate uh, what it, what things have kind of inspired my thoughts in the last couple of days um, until the event in which somebody wants to broach a subject. I'm pretty open about it. As long as it's not going to get me kicked off of YouTube, I don't really care. I'll talk about anything, answer any kind of question. Nothing really embarrasses me. Um, like the funny thing is I'll talk to strangers about a whole heck of a lot of stuff, but I will get embarrassed trying to talk to like if I try to talk to my partner or whatever about stuff, sometimes I can get really embarrassed. So anyway, there's kind of my recap spiel. But see, I get messages from. So I do peer counseling through a website called Seven Cups of Tea or sevencups.com. I think it's a really helpful resource for people, and I think it's something that is good for people to utilize. Even especially in situations like you just described, Chris, where you're feeling like you're suffocating with your parents. So I think my first question, or I guess the first thing I would say after reading that is, do you think that that suffocating feeling is rooted in your general relationship with your parents and like where you're at within your life, or do you think it is because there's not a lot of freedom to um I don't know, walk out the door and go do something else when you get fed up with the family life, or kind of a mixture of both? I certainly remember trying to go home for the holidays from college and having a very, very hard time. I got that. Yeah, I think kind of the restrictions that we're living under is very dependent upon where you're at, you know, in the world, or, like I'm based in the United States. I like to kind of, what I've been reiterating is that I live in Nebraska District 2, just because during the election coverage, they mentioned Nebraska District 2 for a significant chunk of time as being a impacting electoral vote. Uh, but one of the things about that is that we are only now really seeing the first big wave of illness, and only now are people starting to go, oh, crap. So, slowly but surely things, like if I haven't been to a concert, since Christmas of last year, which is mind boggling to me. But anyway, so let's see here. So if you feel like your relationship with your parents creates a problem, yes, this is one of the awkward things that happens. I apologize. Yes, I don't have microphone settings on this microphone. I can just like turn it on or turn it off. So I can't the other day you're like, they won't hear me if you turn down your gain. I'm like, don't work. There's no option. I did go into properties of OBS. Uh, yeah, that's what I'm using. Anyway, so I guess getting back to like what I was saying, Chris, and I apologize for that. My my next question would be, do you think that they the quality of your relationship is deteriorated, or do you think it's consistent with where it was before you kind of left home? I'm assuming that you leave for like school or something and then you come back, for break and things of that nature. So, um, makes me curious to know whether or not you are experiencing something that maybe has always been there, or if it is a fairly new concept since you've been able to kind of step out as an adult and then create something different for yourself outside of the confines of the home. Do you think that you experience a significantly different uh, type of life or emotional state when you are elsewhere? Like when you're at school? Do you think that's serving you very well right now? The reason why I ask is that I think that people will default to this, you know, approach of compartmentalization where they think like it's better to set aside emotional feelings or, stress reactions or whatever it is that you're trying to kind of separate out. And some people it's focused around like emotions and those types of things. And then some people it's like, they grew up in, a really conservative home, but their personal expression is not particularly conservative. So they compartmentalize the person that they envision themselves to be and kind of create this separation between that conservatism that they're used to from like growing up versus what they might experience elsewhere. Yeah. So, do you think that that combination, like the stress that you're feeling, do you think that it's because of your active experience of what like the reactions are from your incorporating the different personality pieces, or do you think that you're experiencing, you know, kind of a fear of vulnerability when breaking down those barriers, or whatever else like you might evaluate it to be? Hmm. I guess so. The question I'd ask you there is, did you really change? Because compartmentalization isn't uh, an actual alteration of who you are. It's simply, putting, it's like you've got a house and you've got five different rooms on a level, and you decided to put a door in the wall between two rooms that previously didn't have a door. So those components of who you are, the components of your house, have kind of not changed at all. It's just the structure that you chose to keep them in that has changed. But even from like the outside perspective, probably people around you don't even realize you put the door in there. So so if you're showing them who you are, that you have known that you have been all along, do you think do you think that your parents might be experiencing a similar desire to compartmentalize away, that they might be experiencing anxiety or like a certain level of fear? I'm like, I don't know what like the circumstances of your whole life it are, right? So I don't know what exactly you have felt compelled to keep for yourself versus sharing with them on a, you know, traditionally. But now you're saying like, I'm going to bring this down. Are you preheating the oven or something? Oh, sorry, it smells like burning. So, um, like I guess like I would wonder if your parents are not responding one way or the other because they're still trying to like actively ignore that there's change, or maybe they knew you better than you thought they did. So they don't see like I like how to kind of help you understand what I'm getting at, cuz I had a similar opening of a perspective not that long ago, like last month. I was sitting down talking to my dad, and I was talking to him about something that, is pretty touchy right now because my dad is elderly, and I mean he's not like a feeble old man, but he's certainly an old man, and we had got to talking about some things that I wanted to accomplish. But the context that I was wanting to accomplish them in was in the context of before he passed away. And ultimately, while he and I were talking about it, his response to one of the things that I told him that I wanted to accomplish revealed to me that he actually had a better understanding of who I am and what I need for my own personal happiness than I thought I had previously like communicated to him. So I think that even if our parents seem to be comfortable with the person that we feel we're projecting, they have inklings of these things that we think we're hiding, right? So maybe your parents are in that space where they kind of had a feeling about some of this stuff, but they were, like you said, like they're comfortable with the person that, kind of kept it to themselves. And now they're having to adjust to how that information is being incorporated into life and how that conversation happens. I could say, like, I mean, one of the unfortunate things about this is that when you don't know the people that you're talking to, is like you default into this space of, my personal experience. Generally, I don't like that. I don't like being in a space where, all I do is make personal references. So I hope you forgive me. But you're just kind of reminding me of something because, you know, when I made the transition into college, I had previous to college, like, I was dealing with a great deal of like depression and anxiety and struggling with like self harm and wanting to completely end it. And I felt like I had nobody I could talk to. I felt like I was completely abnormal and that the sooner it would all be over, the better. And then I went to school. And the reason I went to school was that, like, the therapist I happened to finally get to see convinced me that getting out of the house, even for 3 months, would kind of open up my own perspective about who I am. Right. Well, so I think like there's always going to be that transition phase. Like there's always going to be that spot where, for the longest time you've been kind of the young kid and now you're truly making the transition to more of an adult where your parents, while they will always look at you as their child, they have to make conscious efforts to identify you and understand you as being an adult. And that transition can be super hard, just in the same way like when we're realizing that we are more and more and more, responsible for our own decisions and having to take on the responsibility of being an adult. So I think as a human condition, all of us have this desire to a certain extent to stay with the thing that we know. Because the thing that we don't know is what inspires that, anticipatory anxiety that I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what's down that road. So it's easier to stay on the road that you know than to try and go a different way. But a lot of times the only way like true growth or change or, even positive development really happens is when you have the bravery to walk down that road. So one of the things I think I would say to you is to try and keep in mind that you might have been thinking about this for months. You might have felt like you had a self revelation about your wanting to just be yourself and fuck it, and I'm just gonna stop hiding these pieces of me. And if they don't like it, they don't like it. And that's what you tell yourself. But at the end of the day, what you're really hoping is that there's going to be an immediate acceptance and an immediate flex that coincides with yours. But it's entirely possible that when you represent yourself in this kind of more open and honest and uh, detailed way, that's the first time that they've thought about it. So you're further along in your acceptance of this than they are. And so I think it's important for us to make sure that our expectations are proportional to the actual situation. Because you've said so far that you really didn't have like an emotionally close relationship as parents versus child, uh, all the way till now. And then now you're like, I want that. Well, I generally assume that most parents do the best that they think they can and they follow whatever trajectory or experience or example they were provided as being the best parent. It's not always a good experience, but I do think that most parents have a compulsion to do good for their kids. And so they think that as long as that kid is fed, clothed, has a home, got through school, is relatively healthy, like that they did a good job. But it's fairly recent, even within like our social structures, for there to be an expectation of emotional health that coincides with those physical health things. So I'm hesitant to say that there's necessarily going to be something wrong, but it might require more patience, and it will absolutely feel suffocating, because where it's like you just open the door between this room and this room and you can walk freely now, they still have to kind of navigate into that space first and then figure out what exactly you're trying to say. I just, I mean, like I said, it reminded me of like my own experience, like when I was like 19, 20. I actually had that conversation with my mom where at one point she told me she didn't want me to come home for Christmas. Now, I don't know if you have siblings, but I have five siblings. And at the time, what they experienced was that all of my siblings that were still in the house were relatively, quiet and compartmentalized, just in the same way that you're describing. But when I had gone to college and realized that, like, this person that I thought I was complete trash and, completely worthless, and then I go into a different environment and realize that, like, there are people in this world who will love me exactly as I am. I got really mad. I got really, really mad. I was so angry that I had lived so long of my then, entire life thinking that nobody would ever want me. So then when I would go home, I would I wouldn't censor my conversations. I would ask hard questions. They would tell me to do something, and if I didn't want to do it, I'd be like, I'm going to the movies with my friend. I'm not going to stay home and do the entire family's dishes or whatever it was. And my mom eventually said, "We don't want you to come home for Christmas, because every time you come home for Christmas, there's stress and there's fighting." Because not only would I do that for myself, but then, like, my brother, who's one of my best friends, who was usually very quiet, would suddenly find his voice when I was at home. And it was purely because he had somebody who was there asking the questions and saying, you know what, there's something outside the walls of this house. It can be very, very stressful for your family. And even though at the end of the day, everything that's going to get better has to go through this process. Like, you have to tear off the scabs and let it, reheal. It sucks to do the tearing. It's scary, and I think it's completely normal to, like, think maybe it would just be better for me to revert back, because, you know, I don't again, I don't know your parents, but my parents would say all sorts of stuff to try and, like, get us to scale it back. But, if it's truly what you want, if you truly want that relationship, it might just be right now where you have to own the responsibility of developing it, you know? So if you want a closer relationship with your mom, like, tell her. Tell her, that you're not sure how to navigate that space, but you want to create that that relationship. The only thing you have to be prepared for is that your mom is an entirely separate person and she's her own individual, just like you're, like, I assume that you have a mom. I don't know what kind of format your family has, so if you've got a dad or another mom or whatever it is. Um, exactly. I swear it's like you could be, describing my experience and the experience of a few people that I know where you do have that decision. You have that crux in the road. You can say I'm going to go this way and I'm going to say I have learned that it's incompatible or I don't appreciate the stress that I go through trying to create this. So I'm going to leave. Or you can make the decision that that stress is worth it. I'm 38 now, and it took me, I started opening those doors when I was in my late teens, and I didn't get to a place where I actually felt like I had any type of reciprocal relationship with my mom until just a couple of years ago. And I think that's because my initial reaction was to say, I don't want it. I'm not dealing with this anymore. Like, I'm too stressed out by it. I'll just go be myself somewhere else. Um, but I think you'll reevaluate that. Like even your siblings will probably reevaluate that question every 5 years or so, especially as your parents age and you start thinking about it more in the context of not, well, those are my parents and I just don't have a good relationship with them, but rather to say, what do I want to make sure we accomplish before they're no longer here for us to accomplish anything at all? So I think it is completely understandable for you to be nervous about it, especially to have seen, a collection of people experience similar situations and make the opposite choice. There's a lot of bravery in that, and there's a lot of strength in making the choice that you think is right for you and not necessarily that aligns with what other people have chosen for their lives. The life that you're living is your life. Nobody else is living it for you. And you have to be able to own those decisions and say, you know what? When I wake up tomorrow, or wake up 5 years from now, or wake up the day after my mom dies, I want to feel okay with what I made of that. And it might be that your siblings are okay with the idea that your mom could die, and so be it. But it is okay for you to want to have that relationship with her. I get random songs in my head a lot, and I have a feeling I'm going to end up randomly dancing, and it's going to be completely inappropriate. So I apologize, but So, what exactly makes it dreadful, though? Because I feel like what you're describing is understandable, but dreadfulness comes from an inconsistency between what we're expecting and what we experience. So, if you have freedom and you have the ability of choice, you 100% have the capacity to make the choices you need to make in order to have, the holidays that you want to have. Now, if you think right now it's just going to be these incredibly small baby steps and maybe it's not the right time for them to come to meet you halfway, like, okay, don't expect them to. If you know that, like, let's say your mom will spend half of Thanksgiving just talking about all your siblings and how much they don't come home for Thanksgiving because it's her, like, annual rant. Like, it's coming. Like, just kind of try to reframe it like it's so predictable and it's almost like a joke in how predictable it is. At the same time, you could make decisions like, if you know that she spends a lot of time complaining about making dinner, like, you're certainly old enough to make some of those things yourself. So, like, by not having to be asked to do it, by just contributing to it, by creating some of the elements that you want, like, let's say your parents never put up a Christmas tree, but you really want a Christmas tree, then do it yourself. Like, don't say. I guess, like, my point is to say, like, you're the one who's choosing the change. And whether or not they like the change that you're choosing for your life is kind of irrelevant. They can either catch up and participate, or they can be left behind. But at the end of the day, your expectations still have to be, like, on the level of things that you actually have control over, which means, like, the you are controlling yourself, your decisions, where you're at, and the things that you are going to do in the situation. And it sounds like you probably know what's going to make it worse, what's going to make it better. And if you don't want to have a dreadful, drama filled holiday season, I'm certain that you know what's going to make that better and what's going to make that not so much better. And, like, let's be real here. If it is so bad that if you took an objective lens to what's going on and you would evaluate it as being physically or emotionally harmful in a way that would be, constitute abuse, would constitute, like, if you were 8 instead of 18 and you talk to it, your teacher at school about it, they would call CPS or something. You're also old enough to just not be there anymore. You can say, this is the baseline that I need in order to stay here and to participate in holidays with you. If you can't meet this baseline, I'm going to Julie's house, or, whoever. Like, you can make that choice. You don't have to be with family for the holidays or with blood relatives for the holidays. I think it's almost getting cliche in our kind of last couple of generations, where people say your family isn't, the people that you're genetically attached to, but rather the people that you choose to have a mutual trust relationship with. And So I think that we're told very often that the people we should be going home to are our parents, our siblings. But, that's not always the case. And then I also, I guess, like now I'm curious to know, like, do you have good relationships with your siblings? Because, again, like in my situation, we have 6 kids in the family. Most of us were not attached to our parents, but we're very close friends. Well, not all of us, but like individually, like we have different formulations of friendship, right? Within the actual sibling group. So then I would be like, if you know that it's awful to be at your parents' house and none of your siblings live with your parents because none of them want to have a relationship with your parents, like, why aren't you spending the holidays with a sibling? I think one of the good things that you have in that situation is if you have close relationships with all your siblings, then it means that they're not going to give you a hard time if, like, let's say, your sister or brother or whoever that you choose to approach about, potentially maybe next year, like this year's kind of already set, at least for Thanksgiving, it sounds like, but making future decisions to say, what, if this year is a shit show, like I just don't want to do this again, so can we plan on next year me coming to your house? If they've been through it and they make that choice that you've said they've made, I'm pretty certain that they're not going to just tell you that you should get over it. They may not have, you know, there's a lot of different moving parts and a lot of different things you do have to think about, but at the end of the day, you know, we just have to remember that we're in control of the life that we live. So, if the results of the choices that have been made thus far are making you unhappy or they're making you hurt or, whatever dreadful means to you, then it's perfectly willing and you perfectly have the ability to make a different choice. And it's making a different choice that's going to change the outcome. So I certainly do hope that it helped to talk about it. Um, and you're more than welcome to pop back and let me know how it's going. Whether it be by emailing me or coming back to the stream and just kind of being like, hey, I didn't like go crazy. Awesome. Well, definitely, like if you feel so compelled, come back and give me an update. And let's continue the escape. Have a good night. asked a fairly interesting question, and I'm clarifying something before I actually talk about it on stream. But it's certainly going to tap into one of my um, hobbies. I guess that was kind of ambiguous, and it's not really going to matter one way or the other. Um, you know, if my if this person happens to decide that they want to see the video and they're not watching it right now, they can certainly watch it later. But the question that I was asked, and I'm taking a little bit of a liberty here, I was asked, did Eileen, and I'm assuming it's Eileen Warnos, uh, did she deserve the death penalty or did she need to be in a mental institution? So the person who posed this question to me is a person who shares the kind of the true crime bug. And I feel like true crime is definitely one of those things that as I've gotten older and watched watched more videos and had more open conversations just about the things that I'm interested in, I have found that way more people are following the topic than I originally thought. And I think the reason why I originally thought that like other people didn't pay a whole lot of attention is that even though like shows like 2020 would have these, episodes about serial killers or whatever, and people would make documentaries and things like that. When I would talk about it, I got a lot of negative feedback. And so I wanted to be careful regarding the discussion that I had about it. So I just learned that, the stream is not being watched right now by this person. But they did state that they watched an episode of Snapped today, the show Snapped, and it was about Eileen Warnos, and they feel that it changed their perspective on the case. So I guess what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to finish my thought or discussion when it comes to like the actual like hobby of true crime, and then like where kind of it evolved from true crime into like kind of the focuses that I have, and then um, reveal at least a little bit of how significant my knowledge of these cases can be. So, um, like I said, I got a lot of negative feedback about my interest in uh, in true crime, and I think it probably has to do with the fact that I I when I say true crime, like I'm not like just a true crime junkie. Like I'm not the person who's like, "Oh, let's watch videos about robberies today." And then, the next day it's about like bank heists, and the next day it's about um, you know, like medical fraud or whatever. Like all of these things have different like documentaries and different developments that people chase during this true crime stuff. I think the closest I get to like the fraud cases and stuff is kind of watching, like every once in a while I get into them, but at the end of the day I think the closest I get are like discussions of people who intentionally become polygamous in order to like scam men out of money or whatever. So, like, my personal super interest is in the kind of vein of serial killers. Um, like, even to the point where I have certainly delineated that I have certain serial killers that are my favorites. And when I say that, I'm talking about like people who are fascinating to me, but then also kind of the general storylines and the choices that were made and everything like that. So when it comes to Eileen Wuornos, I think she's a very interesting study because arguably and um, profoundly and confidently and confirmed on the record, she was mentally sick. I'm not going to say that she had an excuse for the choices that she made during her lifetime, but we have kind of a general underlying consensus that a person who has no concept of reality or no ability to handle their own decisions in like the context of reality, like that it's inappropriate to use capital punishment as a way of holding that person accountable. I think part of the reason why it's inappropriate to use that as a means of punishment is because sometimes that detachment is so severe that they literally have no relationship with that. You see it happen a lot where um, it's almost like a goal to be, executed by the state. And I'm not saying necessarily that that was the thought process that Eileen had while she was doing her thing, but I do think sometimes that that's one of the reasons why I don't support the general use of the death penalty, because I feel like it does put the possibility on the table where a person who wants to kill one person ends up blowing it up way out of proportion to the actual issue that they had in the beginning, because they know if they kill enough people and they're heinous enough that our society on the whole will just say, you know what, bye. So with Eileen, she, like, all you have to do is watch some of the interviews with her. And even a person who has no psychological training, a person who has even limited empathy for people who do heinous things, can recognize that she was mentally unsound. So I think about the fact that, when she was doing what she was doing, um, like she's both mentally ill and she's also kind of disavowed by her family, by society, by every construct that most people take for granted. Like when you look at her life and you see, the accounts of the fact that she was, severely mistreated as a child, and to the point where she ends up pregnant, and then she's ostracized by her own family and by her own conservative father. She's kicked out. She's living on the street. She's sleeping in a shanty out in the woods, freezing to death, and trying to figure out, like, how do I survive? And I think even if we look around right now and we look at like a person who's on the corner asking for help because they're homeless, and like, we can conceptually understand that there is a profound limitation that happens. And now it's even worse than it was when Eileen was alive, because at least when Eileen was alive, there was, some kind of fluidness to getting temporary employment, and I think that it was easier to a certain extent to like live in a place like a hotel and to have a job. But nowadays, like it's virtually impossible to do that. Like if you're homeless and you're not living like in a dedicated shelter, then you're trying to figure out how do I manipulate the information about my living experience right now in a way that enables me to get employment. So, my frame for this could be completely skewed, but when I think about like what she was doing and what happened, like I really feel like she had a psychotic break um when she had her first experience of like a trick going bad. She like the testimonies she gave in court was detailed, profound, and heinous of the things that happened to her at the hands of the first person that she murdered. And while she went on to kill like six other people, I have a very hard time thinking that she was like that it was just like she decided she didn't want to try anymore. Like I really genuinely think that she was trying to the best of her ability to make life happen. But unfortunately, she's also schizophrenic. Now, the question then becomes when was the trigger factor? Like, when did she actually go from being, perhaps somebody who had clinical depression and other influencing factors in her life to actually tripping the trigger of her schizophrenia and moving into the territory of actual profound mental illness and disability? Now, I think that when you look at like the interviews that happened while she was incarcerated, you can see the deterioration happening. You can see how much she really, really wants to cling to just about anything that has any kind of stability to it, and it's still not keeping her brain straight. So I think that it was wholly inappropriate for the state of Texas to execute her. But it wasn't my decision. And, I think it's super unfortunate. I think that um, it had some political influence going on with it too. So, like, I feel like the person who went ahead and authorized her, like stopped giving stays of execution and said we need to go forward with it. Um, I feel like they were utilizing it as a way of angling for a better stance in the political realm. And that alone should be enough to say there's no way that she should have been executed. Like, I feel like performing capital punishment on that level is so significant that if we have any inkling whatsoever that it's being done for like a self-serving reason, then it's inappropriate to do so. So anyway, so I guess I'll probably have to clip that out for my friend, but she asked on the Facebook page and wanted to at least give an answer to it. So there's that. I do like But I think it's hilarious that my talking about that apparently killed what few people were watching the stream in the first place. So, yeah. I just uh, let her know that I answered it live and lost all my viewers. So, so what can we talk about now? Let's talk about something that's a little bit less gruesome. Well, like I was saying at the top of the stream, I actually had something that I'd been thinking about that I wanted to expound upon, share, what have you. And if I'm to be honest about it, if I'm going to be real about what, like the content or, the subject matter, it's not a particularly rosy or, happy feeling subject, but it's something that's been weighing on my mind quite a bit in the last couple of days. So I guess I'm just going to talk about it, and if people pop back on and come back by, perfect. But anyway, what occurred was a couple of days ago, I was doing what I do quite often is like I spend a lot of time watching uh, episodes of things on YouTube. As I've mentioned many, many times, I watch a lot of progressive news. I watch a lot of kind of atheist conversations and thoughts regarding like humanist perspective. Um, I've really been trying to kind of develop how I want to have some of these kinds of conversations for myself because uh, I'm not trying to be, you know, I'm not trying to be something that I'm not. Like, I'm just gonna be my boring, nerdy self. So, one of the channels that I like to watch is called SBSK. And that was my spotted leg on my chair. So, for those of you who do not know what SBSK is, and I should probably link them in the description, but I'm trying to avoid like I don't want there to be an expectation of connection. But so I don't want there to be like any kind of misconstrued affiliation when it comes to SPSK and me. But SPSK stands for Special Books by Special Kids. And where they initially kind of started the conversation was that they opened up the guy who created the channel was a special ed special needs teacher and worked with a number of different students with different kinds of disabilities or conditions. And over the course of time, saw value in sharing those stories and discussing those particular issues in a more public forum. So he started to capture those stories. So I've learned so much by watching these videos about different things that occur in the world. Like he's been really, really fortunate in a certain type of way where he's able to be in contact with people who, some of the people that he's talked to are like the only person in the entire world who are living with their particular condition, or they might be the only person in the United States. Or, I think one of the ones I was watching recently was that there had only been 70 people with the particular condition since the year of 1970. But they're mostly kids. For a long time, it was mostly kids that he was going to visit. So it would be like, an 8-year-old living with progeria. Progeria is one that comes up remarkably frequently on the channel. Like, I feel like we have this impression that it is rare, and I know that it's rare, but at the end of the day, from the context of the channel itself, there's been more than one kid with progeria, and but it's interesting even to see that, where people who are living with these rare conditions are reaching out and wanting to share their stories. And as I've gotten to be familiar with the channel, he got to a point where, of course, like there's, when you're dealing with kind of like these alternative life events and stories and stuff, like you only have so far of a reach. And so I feel like at that point he kind of said, okay, well, if you live with an alternative condition or disability or whatever, fill out the application on this website, and we'll talk about potentially having an interview. So I've even personally, because of just the things that I live with and have to manage for myself, which I do intend, at least at some point, to go through some of those things in more detail than just passing comments. Um, I personally had looked into what kinds of questions he was asking in the application and considered putting myself uh, into his whole conversation roulette or whatever. But anyway, the other day I watched an episode that was labeled something to the effect of like living in a family with 6 blind kids. And so, I mean, that in itself is compelling, right? Where you're like, how does that end up happening? So you click in to see like how did this family come about? Because I feel like, you know, a lot of us kind of by default assume, family is just like, well, we had kids. So it's like, well, how did you have 6 kids, who ended up with the same issue? And then, like, the thing is, though, is that you get into the episode itself and you realize, okay, well, this couple intentionally adopted um, these this variety of individuals with varying levels of ability, who all can't see. But there was one of the people. Hey, you know better. Sorry. So anyway, so it was, it was kind of like a day in the life kind of deal. And so he was kind of interviewing them one by one, and having them discuss their relationships and their experiences with the world. Well, one of those individuals in particular had, she's profoundly blind. Um, she's also has some difficulties with like actual movement. and definitely has limitations when it comes to language, like when she's trying to speak and stuff. But when you talk to her, you can tell that she's hearing you, you can tell that she's processing questions, you can tell that she's trying to answer. So they were kind of just talking about, what things they have realized over time, connect with her, what things work for her, and what she loves, enjoys, what helps her connect with her siblings. Uh, they demonstrated, her sense of humor and how she makes jokes and stuff in the ways that she could. But the thing that got to me, the thing that stuck with me, was when they panned back to talking to her parents and were asking her parents questions about what it was like to take care of her. Her dad, he, what he said was that, she has all of these limitations and difficulties every single day. But typically, once or twice a year, she just hits a point where she wails. She wails and cries in this way of just profound human grief. And, when they were talking about it, her parents were obviously emotionally affected by just the memory of experiencing what it's like to witness to that wail. And then they concluded it by saying, if it wasn't for that moment where she just wails, they think she would no longer even exist. Like she would be long gone. So, what it made me think about was just how many people experience these kinds of limitations in the world. Where their brain or their body is completely unable to process kind of in this real time way, where they are still trying to navigate, but are struggling very much so with the not necessarily with their own expressions, but rather I get my conclusion on it is that the frustration is not necessarily in their general experiences, but rather in their inability to be seen, understood, their complete detachment from the general experiences of other people. So when they were talking about her wailing in this way, it got to me because I was thinking about how a variety of people, variety of different types of people have different levels of ability to express themselves. And for whatever reason, where I fall into these categories is in this place where I got a lot of people who tell me that I'm great with words, but I always feel like I'm struggling to be understood. I feel like I'm trying to express my experience, my feelings, my frustrations, the things that I need. I'm saying them out loud. I'm saying them in a way that makes sense to me, but when the other person tells me what I've said, it is not what I said. It's not what I'm trying to communicate. And I start to get to this place where it is hopeless. Like how like I so I'm thinking about it in that context. I'm thinking about it in that framework where I will hit these moments where I can't help but cry, which is what I was doing the other day. Like I couldn't help but just have tears because I'm sitting there thinking about how desperately lonely I am and how desperately trapped I feel and how unable I feel, and how even when I try to talk about it, and I think that I've got a pretty good idea as to what is causing it, and there's, certain levels of remedy for it. But when I'm trying to talk to who I'm told to talk to, like they say, reach out, ask for help, do this, do that, I'm doing that. And the response that I get is, maybe you should talk to your friends about that. It sounds like an emotional problem or what have you. And I just find that profundity getting worse and worse. So it has led me to kind of wonder if everybody is experiencing that, and like that kind of emotional detached shutdown is what everyone is facing. Like, how do you know the difference between like the normal experience and something that would be more indicative of like an actual condition, illness, or otherwise? And I think one of the reasons why I think that like what I'm dealing with is not what everyone else deals with is because the response of go talk to your friends is painful. It is literally painful because, I could sit in the doctor's office and they could say something like that to me, and I literally can't identify a single person that I feel like I can go, like that I feel like I could go to, who's going to understand me, who's going to be willing to hear me. So if I get that frustrated and I get that upset, and I have the ability to speak, I have the ability to see, I can hear, I can write things like poetry, I can at least make people think that they understand me. I can play the game to a certain extent because I've taught myself certain moves. If it's still that frustrating for me and that sad for me, and I still have my days where I wail, the idea of this young lady who is so, like, all I could think of was like, I know exactly, like, at least I know what my equivalent is to that wail. But the haunting experience of witnessing to that is likely because, on a day-to-day basis, you can kind of, for lack of a better way of putting it, like on a day-to-day basis, people can ignore the experience of those who the experiences of those who don't have a standard experience. Like we can sit here and say, okay, well, if you have these limitations, like we don't expect you to have like a, kind of normal concepts or, your um we kind of have an underlying assumption that like maybe your thought processes work a different way, or maybe um maybe that mismatch between ourselves and you makes it so that like we can fundamentally detach our own personal sadness experiences and stuff from that. Like the number of people who are put up on SBSK who will say that they're always happy and that this is they love being happy, they like laughing, they like making jokes and stuff, but when you ask them the question of like what could a person do to make you feel accepted, and they give you such a simple answer like just say hello to me, talk to me like I'm a normal person, what that says to me is that they're really not that happy at all, and that our society is sitting here going, okay, well, you're smiling. You're smiling and you said you're happy. So that alleviates my feelings of guilt and my feelings of sadness that I feel when I'm empathizing. It becomes very, very difficult to make that detachment happen when you identify with it instead of wanting to separate from it. And so when I think about this young lady's wail, I think about the fact that she is probably, I feel trapped in my body and I can at least see what's coming at me. Even if, I'm like, I wear contacts, I wear glasses, I can't really see without either one of those things, but I can still see blobs and I can still at least, say in a clear sentence, what is that? But she couldn't even do that. Like, she can't, the only thing she could consistently do with like a full sentence was sing a song, which, is fascinating to me in in its own right. The number of people who are otherwise nonverbal or close to nonverbal who will suddenly be able to sing a whole song. Just like people who stutter, who are able to sing a whole song without a stutter. It's like there's something about music that's neurological on a certain level that just connects us. And then I think about my own compulsion to experience music and to be a part of the crowd, and to, how hard I had to work to overcome the crippling anxiety that I would feel trying to go to a concert that was a band that I loved, because I couldn't find anybody else willing to go and hold my hand. Like, I had to do that. And I feel trapped. And I guess I just started, like, it's been haunting me. Because it's not that they showed us like a recording of this moment in her life. Like, they just described it. But I immediately thought about the fact that, like, I assume that every person who has those kinds of limitations has a brain and a thought process behind those limitations that perceives the world in a similar fashion to me. Like, that even if they can't say it, even if they can't see it, hear it, touch it, whatever, that as they're incorporating it and trying to like figure out their feelings, they're experiencing the same kind of development that I've got. Now, I understand that that's not true of absolutely everybody. I understand that there are truly people who don't ever elevate to like a thought level that would surpass like an 8-year old or a 2-year old or whatever. But I tend to think that those people who are truly limited to a 2-year old mindset, who actually like go through and like become adults and, you know, try to learn life skills and stuff, like, I really don't think that they actually function like from a thought process perspective as a 2-year old. It's their outwardness that we equate to a 2-year old. But part of that is because they cannot express what they're truly thinking or experiencing. So it hit me pretty hard, and it's been haunting my thoughts because of the whole like if I can't make myself understood and I have these abilities. Like I would love to say that recognizing that made me more grateful for my life. What I think it actually did was make me fearful. And that fearfulness is coming from the fact that, like, I'm 38 years old, and I would say that my perception of my ability to navigate the world, my ability to have conversations and to be understood and to make friends, to like hold a job, like these things are getting worse for me. I'm losing ability. So I think like on a completely irrational and melodramatic level, I thought, what if I became that trapped? And I still had to deal with the same thoughts that I have today, but I had no ability to do anything but wail. That's really hard. It's really hard to like think about. So it's kind of funny that, I can start talking about like a hobby I have and everybody disappears. I could be trying to share something and it's evaluated as, it ends up evaluated as not being worth the time. And like just how evil that cycle back and forth is, where you shouldn't care what people think, but you have to live in a world with other people. And people are social beings who need other people. And then you also have a socialization problem. So, like, you're trying to figure out how do I learn the skills that seem to be normal for and natural for everyone else that will get me to a place where I can make friends and I can make friends with healthy people who are able to be friends with me. People that I can end up relying on when I hit, my medical events and stuff. How do I develop that? And, I know for a long time in my life, I said, oh, I'll eventually figure it out. I'll eventually figure it out. But now I'm, like I said, 38. And I'm having conversations with my doctors about how many years do I have left before I become fully physically disabled in a level that makes it so that I can't travel and I can't have adventures anymore. I have I don't have, that social structure to talk to about that. So you just have to watch it deteriorate. So I guess it's like, with the whale, it's the opposite, right? Because it started in a place where it was completely cut off, and then as they're teaching skills, they are opening up the door for more significance of sadness, more struggle, more confusion, more fatigue, and, you know, ultimately more recognition that who you are does not fit the world that has been created around you. But I'm still trying. And I know that part of the reason that I watch SBSK and similar things like it is because I do want that reminder. I want the reminder that there are people with more profound limitations and borders and far more justification for the feeling of being trapped. Excuse me. Got a little bubbles. Um, that they're figuring it out. So it's not really like me saying, like, if they can figure it out, I certainly can, but more like if they're able to find somebody who's willing to, love them just as they are. I should think that I could probably figure that out too. Which I know makes it like such a weird thing for me to be kind of doing the Mama Lynn thing. I think that one of the reasons why this developed in the way that it did is because I think about the world in a different way, and I bring a perspective, and I don't really have a filter to keep me from saying the stuff that other people are afraid to say. And like I don't understand the game. I don't understand the game in the social life, and I don't understand the game in the, professional life. I don't understand why are we playing games with deception? Like, why are we not ever talking about what's actually going on? It doesn't make any sense to me. Like, the only things we're ever actually talking about, like when we're talking about the real things that go on, are things like, Giuliani's uh, hair dye fiasco the other day. Like, he's literally, like, physically and mentally and emotionally melting down in real time from the White House, giving a press conference. And the enduring conversations that people had were about, like, how his makeup ran. And even when I've heard people like try to address like the more significant, you know, points of that whole conversation or that whole conference, it's like there's still people who just want to focus on the hair dye incident. But I think that we're doing ourselves a huge disservice by effectively creating that denial, by actively participating in the denial. The reason that politicians have power is because we all agree that they do. And from a social construct, social acceptance perspective, it's important that we all kind of come to it with a consensus, especially if we're going to support something like a democratic republic. You know, I was literally just talking about this with, extended family the other day, which is pretty risky in itself. But, um, as a lot of different families are like this in the country right now, and I think this will probably be the last thing I kind of spew out before I say goodnight. Um, anyway, so as I've said tonight, I live in Nebraska District 2. So a lot of people think like, okay, Nebraska is heavily conservative, it's just farmland and cows and corn. But I live in a city. I live in pretty like not the only city in Nebraska, but I live in the biggest city in Nebraska. And this city constitutes an entire electoral vote uh, region, precinct, or whatever it's called. I don't remember. Um, it's still a weird place to live, like, especially as a progressive, but at least I'm not, like, in the boonies. Like, I'm not trying to fight against. I mean, there's racism here. Like, let's, like, not even deny that. But, I don't even know what I'm trying to say. I guess I'm like, I just don't. I'm trying. Ultimately, I think what I'm trying to say is that while I recognize I live in Nebraska, I don't like the whole conservative assumption that people make about Nebraska is not congruent with where my brain is at. So I have a branch of my family that lives here, and I have a branch of my family that lives in the mountain states. I have a branch of my family that lives on the East Coast. My personal siblings have kind of exploded across the country, so I have one sibling that's over towards the West Coast, two on the East Coast, two here in Omaha. Um, but what ended up happening is like when we all kind of got on Facebook and our extended family started engaging more on Facebook. Um, of course, I start getting friend requests from the East Coast family, and I'd already been told that I was probably not going to be their cup of tea. So I wasn't surprised when I recognized the fact that people I'm related to are full on Trump supporters. I can accept this, I can roll with it, but it's pretty sad. It's really sad to me actually. But I forget exactly why I was going down this road. I'm sure it'll come up again, but the conversation we were having the other day was ultimately about, um, the lawsuits of, regarding the electoral votes and trying to overturn the election and, all of this stuff. And so there's kind of an interesting mix of opinions because I don't know if I know anybody who truly believes that, we should just scrap a bunch of votes and, just declare Trump the winner. But I certainly know people who are leaning towards, manipulation or, a planned, stealing of the election or whatever. Whereas, my counter argument falls in line with most of the shows that I appreciate, which is one of the reasons why I appreciate them. And that opinion being that, you would certainly want to think that if we were going to cheat, that we would make it a little bit easier for us to get some progressive agenda in there. Um, I really don't think anybody is trying to play 4D chess or whatever the analogy is of the day. I think that we have a general split of people. There's the people who are struggling with the existential crisis, and then there are the people who truly buy in to the distraction from the existential crisis, because that's really what all of this is. None of it matters. None of it is like human nature or true or, inevitable. It is all a matter of choices. Just like it's a choice for my, extended family to be willing to say to someone like me that I must be delusional and stupid because I would support Biden. Even though if I was choosing my presidential, uh, the person that I'd have in the presidency, it wouldn't be Biden. I'm like, you gave me two choices. And I'm smart enough to know that it's, a fool's errand to write in somebody like Bernie Sanders right now. I supported Bernie's, first run. His second run, I wasn't so keen to support, but it wasn't because I didn't love him anymore. It was because I just recognized reality. The whole thing is frustrating. Like, I don't even want to give time to it. Like, I want to give time to it because I think it's interesting on a certain level, but on another level, I'm like, this is ridiculous. Why are we spending any time with this? There are far more important things to do. We look at something like COVID, where it's like, I live in a city where we have recently been put on international news to talk about the fact that we have death wards here, where people just are set up to try and comfortably die, where they can't send you out into palliative care at home because you're fucking contagious. So you get to die alone in a ward full of people who are dying alone. There's a part of me that wishes that I could just volunteer for sitting in that ward. We're all trying to ignore that reality. We're trying to retain our sense of invincibility. I lost my sense of invincibility a long time ago, so I find it weird to talk to like 65-year-old people who are able to buy into it now. But maybe that's a good note to leave it on, where I'm like, if you got all the way through this, all through all of the topics that I talked about today, it's very hodgepodge. Filling the Friday night that has nothing else going on. But we got to stop running away from that, dilemma of the existential dread. Denying its existence does not mean that it loses its ability to exist. what we're talking about here isn't the same as making the choice of being, of voting or focusing on Giuliani's melting hair. We're talking about making a conscious choice to ignore a constant, like something that we can't change, something that we won't avoid. No matter how many distractions you put into your life, you're not avoiding that. So we have to ask the questions. We have to get answers that seem reasonable to us. And we need to encourage people to develop that for themselves as well. Because denial gets you nowhere. Maybe that's the theme of the entire night. Is denial gets you nowhere. Trying to say that your choices don't result, like, life doesn't just happen to us. Like, we still make the choices to develop the life that we have. Anyway, gonna go ahead and log out for the night. My eyes are getting dry. I'm getting a little tired. I appreciate anybody who's decided to come watch through, look at this, whatever. I didn't do a single puzzle today. Not a single puzzle. Just talking. I'll be back soon. I certainly hope that you'll like, subscribe, or whatever. Not because I want anything other than for the conversation to continue. So, I sincerely hope that you'll consider joining the community, supporting the endeavor, and at very least giving, you know, confirmation. I don't know. I don't know. But yeah, so anyway, there's obviously a bunch of ways to kind of contact or get involved down below. Please consider them if you so choose. I am doing this stream kind of working around gig work and stuff, so the timing is still kind of variable, but I am trying to be somewhat consistent for my evenings. And I certainly hope that you will join me again, which is one of the reasons why I am saying subscribe so that you can know when I show back up. One of my current goals is to get to a point where I can consistently schedule and then show up because I know that that's going to help immensely. But in the meantime, I appreciate anybody and everybody who chooses to engage with the entirety of the sporadic schedule. So, um, yeah, hit me up on the Facebooks or email, and I guess I will probably see you tomorrow. Tomorrow or Sunday. I have to decide. Tomorrow is probably going to be an incredibly busy day with the grocery getting that I do as a gig worker. So I'll try not to exhaust myself too badly, but if I do, that just means that I make bank and we could really use it right now. So I hope, like I said, that you'll forgive me for the inconsistencies, and we will see you when you see us again, or whatever. That didn't make any sense. Either way, with all the confusion and all the things that I don't know, I'm happy to be here and have the conversation, and I hope to see you again. All right. See you later. Bye.